or the neighboring community of Richmond, thank you. And there are no compassion clubs. So just over the border from Vancouver to the next town, there's nothing. There are no lounges, and I thought, well, you know, people ask, why is that? And I said, I'll tell you why. It's because you can only work with a local police force. If you're dealing with the RCMP, they take all their orders from Ottawa, and their orders are to stop everything before it starts. So any lounge that opens up, they raid it. Any shop that opens up a dispensary, they're raiding it. But I know that next month in April, in Red Deer, someone's going to open up a lounge. And I know there's a dispensary being opened up in Calgary in the next month. By someone who has one in Vancouver. Eaton dispensaries will be opened up in Calgary. There's going to be a lounge in Red Deer. And there's going to be pressure all across the country. And here's what I would say. I would say you should open one in Lethbridge. This would make a great lounge, actually. But I know you've got your liquor license and everything like that, and it's a risk. But this location would be a terrific lounge for pot smoking. And I dare say it's coming, because if we get the Liberals elected this year, and I'm hoping, and not necessarily in Alberta, but throughout the country, then I fully expect we're going to have legalization by next year. And that means anybody charged from now till then for any kind of cannabis offense is likely to have those charges dropped. So I really don't think at this point in time there's any worry that a Canadian committing a marijuana offense now is really ever going to be prosecuted or jailed or punished for that in the regime that's coming. Because if the Liberals do get elected a majority, or even a minority of the NDP, what we have to insist for is an immediate moratorium on all marijuana charges. I mean, if they're going to legalize marijuana sometime shortly after they get elected in office this year, then obviously all marijuana charges should stop right away. What's the point? Well, you're just going to be charging people, then dropping all those charges. It's going to be a waste of money. So I would dare say that throughout Canada, we are going to see a lot more civil disobedience. People are going to start opening up dispensaries everywhere. You're going to start opening up lounges everywhere. There is so much opportunity in this country. I will dare tell you this, Alberta is going to be the #1 growing place for marijuana within 2 years, because if the oil patch stays dry like it is now, and all those people who got laid off in Fort Mac, they got big houses with big mortgages that are now worth a lot less than they once were. What are you going to do with that? You can let the banks take it, but the banks don't want it. What you're going to do is you're going to grow a lot of weed in those houses. You're immediately going to turn them into weed production factories, because marijuana still has maintained its same price. Oil may go up or down, but pot is solid right now, and they're going to grow that to pay their mortgages, to pay for those houses, because it's readily saleable. Most guys in the oil patch have a fairly good knowledge of engineering, of mechanics, of machines. For them, growing marijuana in a home after working in the oil industry won't be a big stretch at all. And it's the only thing you can do to pay the bills. I used to see this in British Columbia. I've been in British Columbia 20 years. Whenever the fisheries was dead, people who sold their fishery license got into weed. Whenever the lumber, the forestry industry was tanking and they weren't able to sell wood, those guys would go into marijuana. Every time a natural resource industry in Canada over the past 30 years has had a downtime, people move into marijuana, because it's something you can do within months. It's something everybody with some reasonable skills can do, and everybody knows a place where you can grow it, especially now around the Fort Mac area. With all those layoffs, there's a lot of properties available. So I think Alberta's on the cusp of some big changes made necessary by the economy, the oil economy, but also by the fact that by next year we should be able to have legal marijuana. And if the Liberals don't get elected, I believe Stephen Harper in his next term will legalize marijuana anyway, because the United States will. And it's coming. We have 7 to 10 states in the United States all having a ballot initiative on legalization next year. That is a huge number. I mean, the last year we had 3. We had Washington, D.C., Oregon, and Alaska. They all voted yes. Before that term, we had Colorado and Washington State. They voted yes. And just to show you how things are changing, if you keep the perspective right, every single major enemy I ever had, in the police, in the political establishment, even in my prosecutor in the United States, is now advocating legalization, whereas at one time they swore they would. In the case of the mayor of Vancouver, Philip Owen, he swore he'd drive me out of town. He had me arrested 4 times, charged all that, did everything he could to destroy me, and now he's advocating legalization. He and I are on friendly terms. The chief of the drug squad, Cash Heed, in 2003 was responsible for raiding my business and being in charge of busting people. He now works for medical marijuana companies on their security. The Premier of Ontario, Ernie Eves, who used to have people busted, now he works for a medical marijuana corporation. Mike Harcourt, the former Premier of British Columbia, who also had people busted. He is now working for a medical marijuana corporation. And then you look at John McKay, my prosecutor in Seattle, who swore out the indictment against me, that put me away for 5 years, later wrote the Washington State Legalization Initiative and did press conferences with Jody both in Washington State and in Vancouver to promote the idea of legalization and the ballot initiative in Washington. So even our enemies have been coming over in huge numbers. So there's a lot to be excited about, but there's also an opportunity here for those who are brave to start doing something before everybody else does it. I think Lethbridge could use a cannabis smoking lounge, and I think one probably should be here. And I think this summer would be a great time to start it. And by the way, lounges don't necessarily do anything illegal. It's not illegal to smoke pot. It's not even illegal to be high. It's illegal to possess pot, and that's a key distinction. So when you run a lounge and you're letting everybody else smoke pot, there's no law that forbids people from getting high or smoking pot, right? There are no smoking bylaws, and those usually apply to tobacco, and that's because tobacco is a proven health hazard. Marijuana, on the other hand, is not a proven health hazard. No one dies from it. No one can prove it's a health hazard because there's no empirical evidence that it is. Right? Furthermore, I believe it would be a great case to bring to the Human Rights Commission. I know if I ever get told we can't let people smoke pot in our lounges, I'm going to say, no, that's totally prejudicial. Because we all agree to be here, there's no danger in the first place, so what you're really doing is denying thousands and thousands of people a right to congregate, freely associate, as the Charter says, because you have a concern about health, and none of us doing this action have any concern whatsoever. We don't have that concern. So to me, unlike the tobacco, which we've all shown kills 40,000 Canadians a year, or 450,000 North Americans every year, it's a clear hazard. And even when people say, well, you can smoke pot at home, I say, yeah, but you can also drink your beer at home, but you can make your own at home too. You can make your own wine, and you can go to thousands of places and meet other people who like to drink and commune with them and freely associate with them. So that argument doesn't. So I think Lethbridge needs a lounge, and somebody in this room should think that that could be a great idea, right? And maybe we can get Bob or the Happy Camper to add a lounge to it beside it. Because the only difficulty with an existing store doing it is that even though when I started my activism 25 years ago, everything was illegal, including books, magazines, and everything, and we got that overturned so that 5 years of selling illegal books and magazines, we finally got High Times legal and cannabis culture and all these other things that are everywhere now. But bongs and pipes still technically are illegal. But what we did is, when they put all the bong head shops out of business in the 80s, the federal government passed a law in 1987 under Brian Mulroney, but supported by all the parties, that essentially criminalized all books and magazines, all videotapes, any kind of information whatsoever about any drugs and cannabis, but also made all bongs and pipes illegal, and as well as the marijuana itself. Now the interesting thing about that is when they made that law illegal, to actually distribute a magazine or a book that told the truth about marijuana was a fine up to $100,000 for the first offense and $300,000 for the second offense. There's almost nothing in the criminal code that fines people as much as giving out true information about marijuana. And when I found that out, I thought, well, that's really interesting, because even to possess marijuana is only a $2,000 fine, but to tell the truth about marijuana is a $100,000 fine. And that, way back when, is when I realized the government doesn't fear marijuana, or even the people who use it. They fear the truth about marijuana. And that's why they're trying to eradicate that, which is still what they're doing. Notice that Canada today has more marijuana smokers than ever before. 45 years of prohibition has not deterred marijuana growing. It has not deterred marijuana use, consumption, or anything. More people smoke pot now than ever before in Canada. Canadians are some of the biggest pot smoking people in the world, along with New Zealanders and the people of New Guinea, apparently, those are the three most chronic countries in the world, right? And especially among young people, as well as the general population. So it hasn't deterred what it says it was meant to deter, but it certainly has kept hidden the truth about marijuana for an awful long time. Considering, of course, the irony that Canada, including Alberta, has had cannabis in it for 350 years, brought over with the French in the early 1600s and cultivated all across the prairies, as well as Ontario, for the hemp cordage right up to about 1935. Right? Cannabis was everywhere in Canada for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then it was buried, and then it was like they pretended like it never happened. It never existed. The Americans did the same thing too. So by making a law about punishing even magazines or books, I found out it was in this law, by the way, when I went looking for The Emperor Wears No Clothes. In 1989, a famous punk musician from the Dead Kennedys was touring Canada. I brought him to London, Ontario. Jello Biafra was his name. He used to love that. And he never spoke more to it. And one segment in his 1989 speech was called Grow More Pot. And he talked about this book by Jack Herrera called The Emperor Wears No Clothes that tells this incredible story about how marijuana's been, the secret history of marijuana has been suppressed by the US government for decades, and it went on for hundreds of years. And then I went, wow, I'm gonna go get that book. And I went to get the book, and they told me, Mark, that book's not available in Canada. I said, why? And they said, it's been banned. I said, how can a book be banned in Canada? That was like, every Canadian thinks that. That's what I said. And I, by the way, was a bookseller, but of rare antiquarian books, so I wasn't quite as familiar with this happening until I went to a new bookstore. And I said, really? I said, well, what are you going to do about that to the bookshop? And they looked at me, well, what do you mean, what are we going to do about it? I said, well, you're going to get it anyway and sell it? And they said, no, our distributors don't handle it either. You can't get that or any of these things in Canada. I said, wow, that is like blowing my mind. So I decided, I thought, well, I can't let that happen. So I bought a half-page ad in the newspaper. I imported thousands of copies of Grow books, High Times back issues, dozens of back issues, Grow books of every kind, and I put ads in the paper, and I said, I want you to come and arrest me. I just don't believe this law is constitutional. I don't believe you could do it. And in fact, they didn't charge us because they thought that it probably was unconstitutional, and it would be better just to let me sell them rather than let everybody buy them and everybody sell them. So for about 4 or 5 years, I had this monopoly. I would sell thousands of them, trying to bring it up. And we eventually got charged by giving pamphlets out to students at a school in York, in Toronto, when police had sent an undercover officer to that high school in Toronto. And she was a cute young woman. And she went around and asked every male student if that student could get her weed. And of course, if you're a young, hot girl in high school, you can ask every single guy, it doesn't matter what they smoke or don't smoke, they're going to get you weed if you're a hot girl coming to them. See, can you find me weed? Absolutely, I can. And sure enough, they charged 52 students with trafficking, I mean, which could potentially ruin them, right? So I thought, well, that's appalling. So we went to give out pamphlets for all those students to encourage them to give to their parents, right, to oppose these charges, and that's when we got charged with giving out illegal drug literature. And the action was called Know Your Rights, 10 things every parent, student, and teacher should know about marijuana. It's actually a fairly well-known pamphlet. That pamphlet we were given, the police had us arrested and charged, and my friend Umberto Arafita, who was in charge of Normal at the time, he went to court. I paid Alan Young to process and to deal with it as a lawyer, and we got that part of the law struck down as being unconstitutional. So to this day, yes, books and magazines about pot are illegal, but we have yet to strike down the part that bans bongs, pipes, or anything. And so recently we've had bong shops in Kirkland Lake raided and have all their bongs taken. It's also happened in Prince Rupert, and it happens in isolated spots. And even my magazine, at one time they tried to ban, even after we'd overturned the court, in Timmins, Ontario. And I had to go to Timmins, Ontario, buy a half-page ad in the newspaper saying, I'm going to give up my magazine on the front door of the police station all day long. Saturday, I encourage everybody in Timmins to come and get one, and let's party. And sure enough, I got there. I didn't see anybody when I got there at 10 in the morning. I had hundreds of magazines. And then they came out from behind trucks, behind trees, behind pillars. And within 5 minutes, we had 300 people. I was giving out magazines, and everybody broke out their weed. We started smoking nonstop for like 3 or 4 hours in front of the Timmins police station. And I tell you, they never thought ever again about going and banning a magazine I put out. Right? So if you take it to them, you know, if you don't accept the paradigm, you've got to be brave, you've got to be brave. But I think these are the best times to go ahead and seize an opportunity to do something, because I think we're on the threshold of legalizing marijuana, and I think all the signs tell us that. When we look around the world, I've done several trips to Europe, and a lot of great exciting things are happening there. In Spain, for example, they have over 300 dispensaries in the country, and they sell marijuana to everybody. It's not for medical reasons, and it's not particularly legal either. They just decided that's how they were going to do it. And that model has so impressed people in Europe that now people in Ireland, Scotland, and England are all developing what they call cannabis social clubs, where they get together, they form a collective, and then they assign someone to grow weed for that collective. And then they grow it specifically, pay them a specific amount, and keep all the good bookkeeping, and are doing it in such an orderly manner as to sort of bypass the whole legal apparatus. They're going to create their own regulated system. And this is going on now in Czech Republic, in Austria. I'm beginning to see it happen all across Europe. People are developing these social clubs where they get together and they pick a grower and they agree to buy all his product from them at a certain designated price. And this is how things are being rearranged throughout Europe. So lots of good things are happening there. The price of wheat, I will tell you, this is really shocking though. And we're lucky. In Vancouver, like most people, I think, in British Columbia and Alberta can probably buy an ounce of wheat for somewhere between $165, $70 and $250. And that would be cheap for most of the world. In Vancouver, we have 65 dispensaries all selling marijuana, and the price goes from $5 Canadian to $10. Canadian is about $4 US to $8 US. Well, let me assure you that weed, even in a legal place like Washington State, is $15 to $20 US a gram. In Colorado, it's $14 to $20 a gram. The taxation and regulation has made it, unfortunately, very expensive, which we don't have in Vancouver, being a de facto legal environment. Nobody's been busted in Vancouver for growing pot, or selling pot, or dispensing pot, or possessing pot, or having lounges, or anything like that in the entire 7 months I've been back in Canada. So Vancouver's developed this special regime. They're about to legalize marijuana by licensing them. In the next few months, they're going to license all these dispensaries. That will be a first of its kind around the world, where essentially illegal enterprises selling marijuana are going to be licensed by the locality, who are just simply impatient with the federal government not getting around to regulating this. And in Vancouver, we have no violence associated with it. We haven't had a gang killing in the last year, and Ottawa's had several. In fact, Surrey, where they don't allow this kind of thing, has had 6 in the last week. So it's working out. Nobody wants to rock the boat in Vancouver. We've got 65 dispensaries, another one's coming on board every 3 or 4 days. Everybody's getting along. Pot is so very cheap. When I was in Europe, cannabis in Britain was $18 a gram. When I was in Amsterdam, buying the cannabis cup strains were all $18 to $22 Canadian a gram. Right? In Spain, it's $17 to $20 a gram. I mean, I don't know how people can afford that. It's crazy stuff, right? And yet, they're selling it out. They're selling it out. Can't get enough. There's a shortage of weed everywhere in Europe. The prices are really high. People are growing. They're just not growing enough. We are, in some ways, in Canada, blessed by having a big country with a lot of land that's hard to patrol. You only have so many cops in this country, thankfully. Right? And so we grow a lot of weed here, and it's cheaper than pretty well everywhere else in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know what it's like in Alberta, but I've got to figure it's probably pretty similar price-wise. And as I've told you, Alberta's going to become the #1 grow place in Canada, I think, after British Columbia, by the end of next year. If the oil patch stays flat for another year, you're going to see an epidemic of growing in the northern part of the province. And that will encourage people in other parts of the province to do it too, when they notice that people aren't going to get busted. Because I don't believe the RCMP is going to punish those people around Fort Mac. Because what else are they supposed to do? They're stuck with these big houses. You can't sell them. You can't let the bank take them. They don't want them back. They're probably owe more on them than they're valued right now. So we're going to see a big change across Canada next year. And this election is really important. I don't know what the likelihood of you turfing your Conservative Member of Parliament here for Lethbridge is. I suspect next to nothing. But it is a very valuable goal to pursue nonetheless. Right? Because Alberta can't continue to vote for the Conservatives forever. I figure people are moving here from other provinces. There's a lot of changes going on in Canada. Canadians from other places bring their points of view and get added here. Plus, Alberta's getting much more, is going to get much more into wind power and solar power. You've got a desert that's sunny all the time. Solar panels are cheaper than they've ever been before, more sophisticated. You've got more wind turbines in Alberta than I've ever seen in BC and the rest of Canada combined. Right? I mean, so alternative lifestyles or alternative things are happening in Alberta, and I think we're on the threshold of a really big change with the oil patch going flat. People are going to need to reprioritize. Think about things that were once important that maybe now are less important, and things that weren't so important then are going to be more important, like cannabis as a cash crop for Albertans in a much greater way than has ever been happening before. And I think we're going to see that. And it's all going to put pressure. But I would certainly say I would love to see a lounge this summer here in Lethbridge, right? And it's a very, very kind of interesting thing to do, because when they come and say you can't do this, you're going to say, why? What am I doing? Well, you're letting people smoke pot. He said, well, so I'm not smoking pot, and it's not illegal to smoke pot. They're possessing marijuana, maybe. Right? And so I think you'll have a, they can try and close you, but they don't have any legal right to close you or any legal basis to close you. And so consequently, lounges are springing up all over the country, as well as dispensaries, which are definitely illegal. but are, you know, rarely ever charged. The places that get charged in the Lower Mainland outside of Vancouver, they just take their stuff and close them up, but they don't charge them in court usually, unless there's some flagrant violation. I just want to say I'm so grateful to be here, you guys coming late, because Lethbridge was more supportive of me than any other community in Canada while I was in prison, raising $6,000 over 4 wonderful Christmas things. And I hope people will be at the Moose Hall tonight. There's going to be a lot of rock candidates, a lot of people playing. I'll think of something else to say tonight that I didn't say today. But the message I really wanted to bring to everybody, and I'm going to do that when we do my election tour later on this year. I'm going to be going to 30 cities across Canada, encouraging people to vote for the Liberal Party. And I know that's going to be a hard sell here in Alberta, but there's some precedent. There was one non-conservative member of parliament from Edmonton, so it shows it can happen. And it shows that if our people vote, see, our problem is our people don't vote. Young people don't vote, they all smoke pot, and they're most likely to be affected by pot laws than older people who do vote. And the cannabis culture equity doesn't vote. Now, there's a lot of good reasons why we don't vote. And none of them are good reasons in reality, but they're understandable when I say they're good reasons, is that we've been lied to so much by people who told us they were going to legalize that it makes sense that we don't believe them. Premier Elliott Trudeau said he was going to legalize or decriminalize marijuana in 1970. Hard to believe that's 45 years ago. We were promised decriminalization then. And back in those days, only 12% of the population wanted to decriminalize or legalize cannabis. It's over 70% in British Columbia, and it's over 63% across Canada. And certainly the majority of Albertans want to legalize. And get this, the majority of people who voted for the Conservative Party, 52%, they want to legalize too. It's not even unpopular among Conservatives. So we've got to constantly make that point, that Stephen Harper's just not even hearing his own people. Conservatives want to legalize marijuana too. And so at this next election, twofold. We've got to participate, right? We've got to actually show up and vote. Better than that, get involved with the campaign and help that guy win to defeat the Conservative. But more importantly, just get involved with politics. I can't underestimate how important it is. Yes, we've been lied to in 1970 by Mr. Joe, who didn't decriminalize, and then Joe Clark said he was going to decriminalize in 1979 when we had a Conservative government, and he didn't do that either. And then Craig Shannon said he was going to make it a $100 fine in 2003, and that didn't go over well. The Senate subcommittee, all 9 of them from the Senate, said that we should legalize marijuana in 2002. Nothing was ever done about that. And for that matter, Jack Layton came to my home, did a wonderful interview before he became NDP leader. He became the leader, and he promised us he'd bring up legalization and decriminalization, and he never brought it up again. So my entire life in Canada has been spent listening to politicians who've lied to us. So people say, well, why would you believe this guy? And I'm thinking, I said to the fellow on the radio, I was just on a college radio station, I said, because no leader has ever promised before an election that he would legalize marijuana. Pierre Elliott Trudeau said he would decriminalize, but he was in the middle of his term. He didn't have to do that. This is a fellow who wants to get elected for standing up for legalizing marijuana. And not only that, all 338 Liberal candidates are in favor of legalizing marijuana, and it's party policy, and 63% of the Canadian population fully supports legalization and decriminalization. So we've got the support of all the voters in the country, we've got the support of a major political party and all their members and all their candidates and their leader who's charismatic and expected to do well, if not win this next election. So I have every reason to believe he's going to follow through. Yes, he is upset at me because I said we smoked pot together, which we did. But, you know, in fairness to him, I don't think a guy who's going to be Prime Minister, who's leader of the opposition, who's had 3 kids, gotten married, got elected, since he smoked pot with me, should feel obligated to remember what he did on some lazy summer afternoon in 2003 where joints may or may not have been circulating, right? I don't, you know, if he doesn't remember, that's fine. I've been writing my memoirs and I found out that some of the things I thought happened didn't happen either. Because when people write and say, Mark, are you sure that was it? Because as I remember, oh yeah, you're right. And then I think to myself, how did I imagine it wrong? The example in my memoir I talk about, now this is a long time ago, 1975, you know, I wrote a memoir about going to see belly dancers and drinking ouzo when we're all underage on a school trip to Turkey and Greece. Good times. And but in any case, I wrote it, my teacher saw that. He says, Mark, I'm sure we never saw belly dancing in Turkey and drank because it's an Islamic country and they wouldn't have permitted you to drink and there would be no alcohol. And he said, I'm sure that was Greece when we went there. And I said, oh, you're right. And yet I had a fully imagined scenario where I know it was in Turkey and I was wrong, right? So we do have problems with memory. We do make mistakes. So when people say, well, are you lying? Is he lying? I said, maybe I embellished. Maybe I imagined it. After all, we were passing joints. There were multiple people. He may have taken one. He may have taken it and passed it to the next person in the middle of our conversation. In all that 4 hours, maybe I'm not clear, but certainly he's allowed to be unclear, right? Lots has happened to him. With me, I knew right then, this is the son of a prime minister, and I was speaking with at the same event he was, so I'd met him before, and we were mutual friends who'd all spoken at Idea City. So it was a very comfortable environment, and if it ever comes up where you doubt his authenticity because he denied smoking a joint, don't do that. You know, I mean, there have probably been other people who've denied smoking joints to me because I've smoked joints with lots of people, right? And sometimes you just have to, it's just a bit of a leap of faith, but I really want you to believe that Trudeau is going to legalize pot. He's going to be a great leader of this country. He's going to be someone we can be really proud of in a way that I've never felt for Stephen Harper. Like, I mean, Stephen Harper's just a peculiar man to begin with, right? I mean, he's the most sexless person I've ever met. There's something not right about him. He doesn't have a single friend in the world, and that's weird. No, I've never met a person in any interview said, I'm a friend of Stephen Harper's. You just don't see it. Nobody says they're a friend of Stephen Harper. No one's ever been introduced as a friend of Stephen Harper. Even the guys like Jason Kenney, who's in town today, the Minister of Defense, he's been with Stephen Harper for 20 years. He doesn't say he's a friend of Stephen Harper, right? It's a very strange individual whose only preoccupation is power. He's totally into being Prime Minister, he's totally into, and that's what Bill C-51 is all about, by the way. When people talk about, oh, this is a new anti-terror bill, now we know it's not. It's just a control of citizens' room. But let me tell you this, government only does one job. All governments do the same job, they control people. That's all they do. Every law that's ever passed is to control you. You read them. Every law is circumscribing your behavior. It tells you how to do it, where to do it, what to do it, what you can do with it, what you can do with your money, where you can spend it, how you can make stuff, what you can... Everything government does organizes and controls people. That's why we rebel. As humans, adults, autonomous individuals, we don't want to be controlled. We want the opposite of control, which is independence, freedom, liberty, autonomy. We want, those are all good things. See, you'll notice that when people say, how do you feel about control and dictatorship and authority? People have a very negative reaction, right? That's the reaction we have towards government, because everything they do is controlling us, right? And every instinct we have is to rebel against that, to be free, to make our own decisions, to be liberty. So when I see this Bill 51 and allows the police and our spy agency to do things that were previously illegal, I say, well, who cares? I've never seen a cop punished in my life. In my whole life, I have never seen a police officer punished for breaking the law. I've never seen him fired. I've never seen him asked to pay money. I've never seen him go to jail. I've never seen any government agency ever brought to court and said he violated the charter, you're right, he's spying on Canadians. Right, we know they spy on us all the time. Wiretaps, everything. Nobody ever goes to court to be accountable. I've never seen it. So if some new law allows the Canadian cops to spy on us or to arrest us, that's exactly what goes on right now. I remember when I was arrested for passing one joint in Saskatoon, I spent 5 days in jail before getting bail. This new terror law says they can put you away for a week without a lawyer. It already goes on. I had to have 5 days before I got bail or a lawyer, right? That can happen to you for passing one joint. So, do I care if somebody gets accused of being a terrorist? No. What I'm really grateful for is that we have all those other democratic institutions that still work, like a free press. Because I tell people, listen, if you're worried that they're going to come and take you away in the middle of the night because you're an environmentalist under this new law, I said, really? You think that you're going to get taken away and no one will notice? Like, no one will come to your defense, no lawyer will help you, no judge will cite the charter, no friends are going to go on social media to tell people, no newspaper is going to cover your disappearance in the middle of the night? Of course they are. The rest of the country isn't going to change, just Mr. Harper's government is going to pass a new law, but it doesn't change anything. Cops can break the law routinely and get away with it. Spy agencies break the law routinely and get away with it. Our military can basically do whatever it wants and get away with it. All those establishment things controlled by the government typically get away with everything anyway. So no new law is really a change in the status quo. And it's important to think that when you think, oh, Trudeau supported Bill C-51, he has to support it. Most Canadians have been bamboozled into thinking we need a terror law, like about 80%. Which goes to show on one hand how easily influenced Canadians can be and how vulnerable we are to propaganda and misinformation. Although I will say, like, Canada is a very pampered country. If the killing of 1 or 2 soldiers is enough to make a country go into some kind of panic, and think we actually are facing terrorist threats? That's crazy. Most countries in the world face dangers like that every day. Bombs go off in countries all throughout the Middle East or Europe or parts of Africa, and they deal with that reality just like they deal with natural disasters like earthquakes and mudslides and things we can't even begin to imagine here, although the flood was pretty bad a couple of years back. Right, and the cops of course went into everybody's home and ransacked the place, and have any of those cops been called to account for their unaccountable behavior of breaking into people's homes without warrants under completely dubious circumstances, checking their guns and all that sort of stuff? Right?
I heard it was deemed unconstitutional.
It is unconstitutional. Obviously it's but they weren't, not a single cop was reprimanded or punished, is my point. Nor was anybody who ordered them to do that. And that's so consistent. Now I would like it to be that we would have a justice system that even establishments, spy agencies, police officers would be held accountable. But in my lifetime I've just never seen it. Right? So there's no reason to expect it now. So some new law that grants them powers that I assume they already have does not influence me, does not concern me. Right? Everybody's getting up in arms about it. Man, your government does whatever it wants anyway. When do they ever punish? Come on, really? Right? So the only time they're punished is at the ballot box. Right? When you get rid of one crew and bring in another. And pray often vainly that they're going to be better than the previous ones, right? So that's what it is. It's a bit of a leap of faith, but I hope I can get you convinced to support the Liberal Party and to talk it up and to work for their candidates and work for their campaign, if only for that one issue. When people say, well, you know, marijuana's not important enough to me, and you always got to bring it up, hey, but we've been waiting 45 years, right? How long are we going to really wait for this not so important issue that's had 2 million Canadians arrested, that's spent billions of dollars, that's had hundreds of thousands of people go to jail for? Like, I mean, we're not talking minor stuff here. In the last 50 years, 34 million people worldwide have been arrested for marijuana, and several million went to jail. And Canada's one of the leading among them. We have had 2 million arrests for cannabis in 45 years. We've jailed hundreds of thousands of people. In the United States, there are well over 30 million people have been arrested in the last 40 years, 45 years for cannabis. So this is a huge, I'd almost say Holocaust on a big scale. People get killed because marijuana is illegal. You know, police corruption is endemic around the globe because of marijuana prohibition. We have completely corrupted certain governments like Mexico, where 60,000 people have died in the last 10 years of wars over cocaine and marijuana, essentially. 60,000 people just killed in one country over drug prohibition, right? Now, I would normally say that would be coming here if we continue prohibition, but I have every confidence that both the United States and Canada are going to get rid of this prohibition in the next 5 years. And so I have a lot of optimism, a lot of hope. And then I regard my time in jail. People say, oh man, I'm really pissed off about you being sent away like that. And I said, don't be pissed off. It was a very, very good trade. Believe me, if there was another opportunity that we could see the kind of advancements that we're seeing today, in exchange for one guy going to jail for 4.5 years, if that's the kind of sacrifice required, I would do it again and again and again. Because we're seeing a worldwide wave of intellectual support for legalization. We're seeing it everywhere. You know, we're seeing it in North America, we're seeing it in Central America, South America, all throughout Europe. South Africa has a case going to the Constitutional Court later this year to try and legalize marijuana. It's happening in Morocco, you know, where the people who do the hash are trying to get an increase in their market. They're saying we should legalize so we can export this stuff officially to Europe. And so on, it's going on like that. Everywhere in the world there's pressure, there's pushing. People want to legalize marijuana. We're part of a great wave, and we're part of a very proud culture. And I think in Alberta, we just need to push it more. There's not enough going on here, and I think there should be more going on. We should have lounges and dispensaries in Calgary, Edmonton, absolutely, lounges in Red Deer, Lethbridge. Banff would be a great place because they get lots of tourists too. And I know the people there would support it, because when I was on my farewell tour, we got great audiences in Calgary and Edmonton, packed them in. I just know the sentimentality is here, and the momentum is coming, and we should do something with that. I'm thanking you for doing everything you could for me, and I want to be here for you. If something's happening, and you're going to open a lounge, or you're going to open a dispensary, I will be there on your opening day. And that way, I can get arrested with you. I'll sell a ceremonial prayer. Now, and even that's a game, because I recently was told by a guy in Alberta that the new law they passed criminalizes second convictions for cultivation and trafficking with a minimum of 3 years. And I thought, well, at least you'd have to be convicted under this law. And the guy said, no, any conviction you've ever had gets applied to this new law. So if you are trafficking now, you've got to get that mandatory minimum, right? Which is quite significant. So there are hazards and there are risks involved, especially if you've already got a trafficking conviction like I do. But like I say, I don't believe this is going to happen. I believe that we're going to legalize pot, they're going to drop all the charges, and I think judges are going to refuse to put people in jail for pot by the time next year and the year after rolls on. So a lot of good things. I'll be glad to answer any questions, anything you want to ask, or anything about the state of cannabis around the world, or what's going on in Vancouver, or yes, sir.
How do you get around with the lounges able to smoke marijuana in Vancouver with the no smoking bylaw? You check those smoking bylaws, they're all about tobacco and tobacco derivatives.
That's not true, Mark. It's weed, it's anything. It's just civil disobedience. You just got it all this. They changed the bylaw, it includes any burning.
I know that's true in Vancouver, they just changed it.
That's what we're talking about. We just civil disobedience.
You just do it, you just get around it. But here's the thing, the explanation you give them is that our smoke is in no way harmful like tobacco smoke. You can justify tobacco bans based on some degree of health, but that doesn't apply to us. And secondly, we all agree to be in that premises, smoking marijuana for its benefits. We don't even acknowledge there's any negative aspect to it. We're there for its benefits, and I believe we can make a case before the Alberta or the BC Human Rights Commission and say, listen, this is purely prejudice. The alcohol people are allowed to meet in bars. They could drink it at home if they wanted to. They're allowed to be in bars. They can make their own beer at home. They can make their own wine. We're asking for the exact same thing. We want to be able to meet, freely associate. The Charter, by the way, guarantees your right to association, and I believe that's going to trump any no smoking bylaw.
We also had, it was a political party headquarters forever, so it's just like, oh, it's a political party office, and nobody wants to raid that.
And that was believable because we ran a full slate of candidates in 2001. We ran 79 people for the BC Marijuana Party. Every riding in British Columbia was represented by a candidate. And then after that, we decided we're going to use this name and create a center of attention. So we made it the BC Marijuana Party Lounge. And the police were always kind of, maybe raiding a political party's offices doesn't sound like a very good thing. So they let us do that. Now we call it the Cannabis Culture Lounge. We dropped that. But yeah, you're right. You could probably do that, but you really have to run the candidates, though, to begin with. And that's a lot of work. I think the groundwork's already laid that civil disobedience is very useful and a successful tactic. And the likelihood of you getting punished severely is not that great. Right? You could lose money, you could lose weed, you could get arrested, you could spend a night or two in jail before you get bail, but you will get bail, right? And those courts will move slowly because there's going to be a clog when they decide, are we really going to prosecute these or are we going to wait till the next election? And I think you're going to see a lot of that waiting till the next election to determine what the policy is on cannabis in this country, because it's going to change. It's not going to be the same. Even Stephen Harper is toying with the idea of giving out fines. And by the way, if he does that, I have a suggestion for you. That giving out fines for weed would be under the Contraventions Act. Under the Contraventions Act, the officer just gives you a ticket with your name on it and says $100 possession of marijuana. If you don't want to pay the fine, just go to court and say, Your Honor, it wasn't marijuana. And they're stuck because that cop is not testing that stuff with Health Canada. Every prosecution today, if you get charged with marijuana, they have to give a lab analysis that it really was marijuana. They have to prove it's marijuana, right? They can't assume it's marijuana. That's why they hate doing that. That's why they don't want to charge you. It costs thousands of dollars to get a Health Canada lab report. It takes a long time. It means the cop has to appear in court. It's a whole bunch of hassle they don't want to do. But when they give you the Contraventions Act $100 fine, then you get all this out, and you go to court and say it wasn't marijuana, they didn't keep any of that evidence. They're not going to test it. They have no way to prove it's marijuana. So the judge will say, in the absence of any evidence proving it's marijuana, I will have to let you go, right? So those fines won't need to be paid either. And in the Contraventions Act, there's no way they can enforce those fines as well. They can't do anything more than give you the fine and then one day hope you pay it off. There's really nothing else available as a lever. So if you hear that they're giving us fines, it's really like not any progress, but it's not a step backwards either. You won't have to pay those fines. But you will have to go to court to tell the judge that you deny ever having marijuana, and you'd have to prove it, which you won't be able to do, so the judge will let you go. So that's what you do in the case that happens. And the Conservatives are proposing that, and they might actually propose it next month in Parliament. I think they're going to surprise it and change the legislation regarding how that is done. I don't even know if they need to change the legislation. It might be just an executive order, and then it makes it effective under the Contraventions Act. Any other questions? Anything you'd like to say?
Anything going on here I don't know about, Austin?
Some information of the Allard case going on for...
Okay, well, in Vancouver yesterday we concluded a 3-week trial in the Federal Court of Appeal, and it went terrific for us, but that's to be expected. It's in regards a lower court decision that allows everybody who was growing marijuana under the old regime of the MMAR, medical marijuana, what does that stand for, MMAR?
Registry Authority or...
Access regulations, right.
There you go.
And they have kept that in place. So whereas the government wanted to stop all people from growing their own medical marijuana and get it done exclusively by licensed providers, of which there are now a number, and they're big, and they're interesting too. But those people are producing marijuana and are distributing it to a lot of the people under the MMPR, the new regime. But everybody who is growing marijuana for themselves under the old regime has been allowed to do so because of the courts under this Allard versus Canada lower court decision. They just finished in the Federal Court of Appeal. We're going to win that one too. But the federal government also knows this, and they're waiting to get to the Supreme Court. And when they get to the Supreme Court, that's when they're going to hit us with their really good arguments, because they did not put forward a good case at all in the lower court or in the Federal Court of Appeal. And I think it's deliberate so our lawyers wouldn't know what their approach is going to be when they get to the federal court. So I think they just conceded this one. We're going to lose it because our side was way better prepared, better everything, better interrogated, and a more legitimate claim under the charter to be able to grow our own medicine. So the Allard case in the Court of Appeal went terrific. Everybody's very happy with it. Lawyers are happy with it. They expect the judge to rule in their favor, but then that takes them to the Supreme Court. And we're also in the Supreme Court next Friday over edibles and extracts being made legal under the current medical marijuana leaf. It's not legal for any of these licensed providers, nor for that matter all the dispensaries, to sell food-grade cannabinoids, lozenges, candies, chocolates, everything that's not dry bud is still technically illegal even under the medical law regulations of the MMPR, and we're under the MMAR. And that's being heard this Friday, coming up in Ottawa, and we should be victorious like we were in the lower courts there too. And that's being led by Kirk Toussaint, and then Kirk and John Conway are doing the Allard case. And there's lots of great stuff going on. The good thing is that fundraising went really great for the Allard case. They raised over $250,000. I'm pretty impressed with that. Right? They had several lawyers working on that. There were 5 lawyers in court for our side, so that money's getting sucked up like crazy. And it's been a year and somewhat in the making as well. So, you know, these things have been very expensive. So if you've given any money, thank you very much. It's gone to great use, both in the case of the Supreme Court for extracts, which is Owen versus Canada, and the Allard case, which is home growing. So
awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
How do they charge you differently with the DUI with marijuana versus alcohol?
Okay.
It affects you so differently.
More good information for Canadians. First of all, we know that if you drive stone like I do every day of my life, you're a better driver than me. You're way better. And they finally have a study to show it. That study that is blown out of the water that marijuana. See, I've never agreed that marijuana impairs you in the first place. To me, marijuana enhances everything. And in a lot of ways, that's why it's really illegal. The reason it's banned from sports is because it makes you a better competitor, a better athlete. It allows you. I've met so many wrestlers and people in sports and CFL. Everybody at the CFL game drops in. CFL doesn't test for marijuana. Those guys all smoke pot, right? And when they tell you, it's because it allows them to focus off their injuries. Most of these guys are bent up, bruised. They got broken bones. They got stuff healing. They're constantly getting concussed. All this sort of thing. If they actually felt their pain in a game, they would be too distracted to play it. So a lot of times they smoke pot, they can focus on what they want to do, they can focus on what the outcome is they want to have happen, and they can forget about their pain. You know, it allows their mind to focus on what they are doing in something that's really high risk and high collision as sports. So I would say, you know, I drive all the time, never had an accident in my life. I would never think not to drive stoned. And as you all know, if you're a regular marijuana user, it's an awesome experience to drive. You're not in any rush, you don't go into the passing lane. I've never seen a pothead have road rage, right? But more importantly, you're also very cognizant of your passengers, the safety of your passenger, the distance of the car ahead of you, and everybody who's chronic goes to speed limit. You know, that's, you know, it's like you knew. You drive, you go, hey, I'm going the speed limit. You always look, you're going the speed limit, right? But if you're not high on pot, you can see that speedometer drift right up there, and it's like, hey, how did that happen? I'm doing 150 down the number 2 already. Everything that's really easy to do. Pot people are better drivers. And finally, 2 weeks ago, a study came from the United States that they expected would show the opposite. It was commissioned by the U.S. government. Those are always priceless when they commission a study expecting that pot people are going to turn out badly. And it turns out we're as good as straight drivers. But if you read the report, we're even better than straight drivers. Because they analyzed how many accidents pot people got in. But when it got down to how many were responsible for the accident, it was even a lower percentage than just straight people who've never smoked or drank or done anything. Right? So I've always noticed that pot people are good drivers, they're better drivers, you know, stone drivers are people who... So whenever they tell you, oh, you wouldn't want your surgeon doing surgery before a bong hit, yeah, I would. If he loves his job, he's going to be really good at it, stone, right? And they say, well, you would want a pilot flying an airplane. Yeah, I would. Because if there's trouble, he's going to be calm. That's a guy who's not going to blink in the face of danger. I have a lot of confidence that cannabis, the only thing, okay, I will tell you this. Most things, I've tested this out, I can do most things as well stoned as straight. And most times you only think you're different because it's all about perception. Most times your performance is about the same, the way you're physically responding. The only thing I can't do as well as stoned is read. If I am stoned, I'll never get past the first paragraph. I know that. And that's why teachers sometimes complain, right? Along with the fact that pot people have 5 natural enemies, right? The 5 natural enemies of the pot people are your parents, right? Teachers, policemen, priests, and politicians, right? 4 out of 5 start with P there. And the reason being is they all require unquestioned authority over you. Remember when I said government was all about control, but they're not the only people. They've got agents out there too. The politician wants to control you, and the policeman is enforcing his control. The priest wants his mumbo-jumbo to dictate and determine your life. And your parents want unquestioned obedience, as do your teachers. And you always know this, because the first thing when a young person smokes pot is, within a week they have an argument with their parents. And it's all about jurisdiction. You got no authority over me. Where does your authority come from? You just made that up. That's not even like real. And parents know that. They don't like kids talking back, right? And of course, as soon as you talk back to your teacher, everything in your book is propaganda. A lot of this stuff didn't even happen like this. You're just teaching us this because you have to. Now, teachers have no argument for that. That's true. They do have to teach it to you, right? But then you start talking back and you basically saying, I'm not buying into this. I'm not accepting your paradigm for it. And so what happens is that those people are all the people that are offended by pot use. Teachers, parents, politicians, priests, and the policemen. All the people who want unquestioned obedience. And this circles back to something that I started saying, Austin, you're keeping track. I brought that up only because one of those 5 I was going to reference. And we don't know. But was anybody else, where was I going with that? You asked a question. Somebody over here asked a question. And I was going to riff off on that. And then I detoured. Reading, yes. The only thing I can do is reading. But I found other people that said they read and they study stone all the time and it's terrific for them. So that might be just me, but everything else like driving, household chores, working, you name it, looking after kids, all terrific on me, right? So I'm not a person who believes that it impairs you. So if you don't accept that it impairs you, then you look at it in an entirely different light. If it's only an enhancement, if it's only... See, to me, when people say, you know, I say, don't make too big a deal about pot if you're using it recreationally. The only thing about pot is it makes whatever you're doing more fun. But it doesn't change you as a person. It doesn't make you a bad person. It won't make you crazy like the alcohol people, right? You know, I said this on the radio station. I said all parents should, at a very early age, encourage their kids to hang out only with the pot people. Right? The pot people are the only safe people any parent should encourage their kids to hang out with. Everybody else is dangerous. Every one of them. Right? Don't hang out with the jocks. God forbid, that's dangerous. You know, there's 10,000 injuries every year into hospitals in America and Canada based on cheerleading injuries, people throwing up in there, breaking legs, bones, and shit like that. That's dangerous stuff. And all the people who have damaged spines and necks and collarbones because they're playing football or hockey and stuff like that in high school, that's a dangerous group to hang out. Don't hang out with the jocks. And by the way, don't hang out with the boozers either, because they are very dangerous people. They'll be doing all sorts of crazy shit, trying to get in your pants, trying to get you drunk, trying to get you driving around all crazy on alcohol, doing stupid things, getting into fights. like, don't hang out with those people. They are very, very bad. Don't hang out with the huffers either. And don't hang out with the well-betrimmed snorters either. Stay away from the goth kids who resent not having two parents and they're all angry and they're hanging out with each other. Stay away from those people. That's what, like so it goes. So when it gets down to it, by the time you've eliminated every, the wastoids, the sluts, and all the except there, you only say people you can hang out with the hot people. They won't do anything crazy. They're totally trustworthy. They're not going to screw you wrong, and you can have lots of fun growing up, right? Which is what the essence of it is, right? So parents should be telling their kids to hang out with the pot people and just stay away from all the rest of the And so this came up on the radio, so he said, what do you think there should be age limits? I said, listen, I'll take anything that gets us to a better place than where we are now. So if we have to make an agreement that you got to go for 21 or 18 to get weed legally, fine, because at least everybody's going to be 18 pretty soon. So you don't have to wait long. But the reality is, what are you going to do with kids who are 15 and 16 to get weed? You're going to charge them? It's ridiculous, right? And if you think that the people selling 15 and 16-year-old kids are guys like me standing by the schoolyard, you're dead wrong. The people who sell them weed are their best friend. So if you want to have people arrested, you're going to end up calling your friend's mother and say, I think your son should be arrested because he sold my son some weed, right? Because that's who they buy it. They buy it from their best friends, right? In fact, that's how everybody who's a dealer in weed got started. Eventually, one of you thinks the economy of scale first. One of you picks up on the math before the others. Like, I'm sitting with you, and also we say, we don't have any weed, but you've got like $50, and you've got $50, and you're thinking, we could buy a quarter for 50, and I'm thinking, yeah, but I could buy an ounce for 150, and I have a quarter. So that's what you do. You end up buying, you collect money from others, and you use their money to buy your stash, and you sugar, and you're like,
and you make
smoking
a
for
profit.
free now. And that's how everybody I ever knew started out as a dealer, so they can smoke for free. Right? So if you want to stop us from smoking for free, you're just going to have to legalize it to basically around 13, 14, and 15, right? Now you might make a law that says the parents will have to be informed and whatever, but the likelihood is, weed smells. Most parents who pretended they didn't know knew all along, but they just didn't want to have an issue about it.
They were
because
smoking
sometimes
too.
kids don't need to know about what you might be doing too, so best if that's all we're smoking, we'll just keep that to ourselves, right? So parents usually know they're smoking weed, they can smell it. God, you come in on a cold day, the person reeks of tobacco or weed. You can't hide that smell, right? So parents are hipper than kids think, and kids are probably a little more cautious, good for them in order to keep it from parents. But I think they should tell their parents right away that they're smoking weed. And then you don't need to worry, Mom, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to smoke I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just smoking weed. And I think you should know about that because I want you to know I'm safe and hang around with a good crowd. Right? Good crowd of people. And I think most of us know that's true. Most people I know who smoked weed at 40 started at age 14, and they turned out all right. So, any more questions? I'm having fun.